I call the Honourable Craig Foss.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A pleasure to speak in this third reading debate, and I'll pick up where my colleague Mr. English left off, and also pick up some of the points that the previous Speaker, Mr. Parker, the Honourable David Parker, was just making. But I do note that he was monstered last night, thrashed, beaten by the humble Simon O'Connor, one of our MPs, in a debate in around capital gains taxes up there. I believe it was at the university. So, Mr. Speaker, things are looking good in showing the depth of National's understanding of things economic and the competency across our caucus. Mr. Speaker, National is working for New Zealand. National is working for all of New Zealand. National's plan is working for all of New Zealand. New Zealanders can continue to trust in the National Party, a National-led government. New Zealand can continue to be confident about where our country now sits in the world and where we can be. Our families can be confident and continue to trust in the National Government to deliver for them and their families. That is in spite, Mr. Speaker, of the global financial crisis. That is in spite, Mr. Speaker, of New Zealand being in recession when the National Government came into government in 2008. That is in spite of the decade of deficits inherited as outlined in the pre-election update by the independent analysis by Treasury in 2008. And, Mr. Speaker, that is in spite of the unfortunate tragic circumstances in Christchurch and the resources we are committed to rebuilding Christchurch. Also, Mr. Speaker, we continue our prudential management of the economy, which delivers better public services each and every single day across the myriad of government services. And of course, Mr. Speaker, New Zealand can trust and be confident that we'll continue to deliver a surplus in the accounts as shown in this budget. Mr. Speaker, New Zealanders can continue to trust the National Party to deliver results, be it on interest rate, positive results on interest rates for our families, the OCR, mortgage rates. On net migration, Mr. Speaker, New Zealanders can continue to trust National to deliver. Cost of living is low, Mr. Speaker, unlike the contrast I'll talk to in a minute when we came into government in 2008. After-tax wages are improving, Mr. Speaker, under this National-led government. A fairer tax system has been put in place, rewarding all Kiwis, particularly lower-income Kiwis and those receiving assistance in one way, shape or form, be it assistance or tax credits. We're also delivering across the social sector as well as the economic sector, Mr. Speaker, be it in education, be it in early childhood education, virtually doubling the spend of early childhood education. In the primary sector, with national standards helping parents being informed as to the progress of their children. In the secondary sector, with targets, hard lines in the sand for attainment and achievement for our students across their demographic. And of course in the tertiary sector. In the law and order sector, Mr. Speaker, 30-year low for various crime statistics. Reoffending statistics, low and declining, Mr. Speaker. More police on the beat due to better public services across justice, court time and prisons. Mr. Speaker, New Zealanders can continue to trust National to deliver for all of New Zealanders. National's challenges, a National-led government, the challenges we now have are to how to manage and sustain surplus in our accounts and an ongoing, growing economy, creating higher after-tax wages for our family, delivering better public services and creating wealth for our population. That's the challenges this government has, and they are much more better challenges, I'd gather, Mr. Speaker, than the challenges that Labor are now trying to articulate and that they had, because their current challenge is trying to be positive for more than 5 minutes, because it doesn't seem to last. Whatever slogans they may put on their billboards or talk about, they are not positive, they are negative, Mr. Speaker. The previous Speaker talked about growth of a Labor-led government. So the only thing we have really to compare is the growth and the statistics and the metrics that they resulted in the results that they had when they left government in 2008. That's what we inherited, because the growth they talk about was actually based upon inflation. They inflated wages. Yes, gross wages grew, but inflation was running at 5%, Mr. Speaker, when we came in, when they left. They talk a big book, Mr. Speaker. Actually, one point, and the previous speaker started talking about their capital gains tax. Typical Labor, normal form, Labor, Greens, talking about tax. New taxes, adding taxes, basically other ways to take money out of our hard-working New Zealand families. Another tax is what they're talking about. This capital gains they talk about. Labor says it will raise $4.5 billion in the first 4 years. That's what they said, $4.5 billion cash in the first 4 years. How does that work, Mr. Speaker? I think their tax is at 15%. So if you work the numbers, it's about $1.1 billion realised tax every year for 4 years. The numbers don't add up. Like any of their numbers, actually they must be trying to be a bit tricky somewhere. They cannot, under the current settings, the settings that they've announced, raise $4.5 billion cash over the first 4 years of their yet another tax, no matter how they colour it and what they describe it, how they describe it. So let's look at some contrasts, Mr. Speaker. Previous Speaker, Mr. Parker, was talking about contrast. Fair enough. And it's actually quite appropriate and right as we move towards the end of this Parliament to look at, after 6 years, where the national government-led government is at, the economic results particularly, because this is the third reading of the budget debate, and contrast that where Labor was at when they left office in 2008. Particularly, remember some of the highlights I remember at the time, because the previous member spoke about exports. There was a problem. The export sector, as we discovered when we came into government, had essentially been in recession for about 4 years. New Zealand's an exporting nation. The previous member was talking about his, well, he seemed to be quite happy, in fact, if exports did decline. They were declining in recession for 4 years when we came into government. We're an exporting nation, Mr. Speaker. What was Labor's solution? Does anyone remember export year? That was their solution. Some highlight. What else did we have back then, Mr. Speaker? Well, right back then when we came in, we had 5% inflation. After years of good economic prospects, Labor blew it, and that's the test of if they were to become in government again. 5% inflation, Mr. Speaker. Absolutely, the result of that is theft of financial assets, theft of state savings, and actually hurts the most vulnerable the most, because it makes their cost of living so much more expensive than it need be. So yes, Labor just sits on inflation to try and boost their accounts. Contrast that with where we are now. 1.6% inflation now. 5% when Labor left office after 6 years of a national government with all the issues we've dealt with. 1.6% inflation for New Zealand. 8% was the OCR when Labor left office, the official cash rate. They talk about changing the Reserve Bank Act or something. Nothing will change that part. When Labor left government, the OCR was around 8%. 8%, Mr. Speaker. It's currently just over 3%. Just over 3%. Mortgage rates, Mr. Speaker. What better measure when one talks about Kiwi families and their aspirations and home ownership? Mortgage rates when Labor left office, because that's the test when we go to the election and wonder how's National performed in the economy, how did Labor perform? They're our test. National mortgage rates just over 6%. Labor 11%. 11% mortgages on our families in New Zealand under Labor. Current account under the national government, 2.8%, apparently deeply worrying for Labor. Under Labor, 8% the current account. Further theft on our population. Net migration, 0 to Australia, Mr. Speaker, this June. Net migration, 40,000 in the last year of Labor, 3,000 per annum, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, New Zealanders can trust National to continue the hard work implementing our plan for a better, sustainable, brighter economic future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the honourable member Grant Robertson.
Well, that member says that we can trust him. Well, I wonder